Okay, well, it's about 2 o'clock. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to the second of two online workshops that we're doing for the open request for proposals for SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants this year. My name is Tom Ardito. I'm the director of the Watershed Grants Program. I see some new names here and some old friends of the program. So this presentation will be kind of aimed at everybody. So if you already know a lot about the program, forgive me for going over things you may already know, but for anybody else, this should answer a lot of your questions about the SWIG grants program. Really, anything you need to know should be on our website. It's snepgrants.org. Just type that in, and that'll take you to the main SNEP grants website, from which you can link to the EPA SNEP program, which is like our umbrella program. You can link to past grants. You can link to the request for proposals page that has the actual RFP, obviously, and application form, and other information specific to preparing an application. See if I can figure out how to advance the slides. Here we go. I work for Restore America's Estuaries, which is a national nonprofit organization. We're a network of coastal conservation organizations. And the one that most people in the region will be familiar with is Save the Bay in Providence, Rhode Island, one of our member organizations. Oh, and let me say, but really before I get started, we're recording this, so you could always go back and watch it again, or watch the other meeting that we did the other day again at our website. And we'll take questions. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of the session. So either tap your questions into the chat or raise your hand. And when we're done, I've got about a 10-15 minute presentation about the program, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Restore America's Estuaries has a cooperative agreement with EPA, which you could think of as kind of an umbrella grant. And we manage this SNEP Watershed Grants program and pass through federal funding to our grant recipients. So the program is really a federal funding program managed by a nonprofit under a cooperative agreement. So that means we're part of the broader Southeast New England program, which was created by Congress and is managed by EPA Region 1 out of Boston since 2014. And here you can see the vision of the program. I won't reread it here, but it's important to read it and be aware of it. And the three main program goals. And if you go to snepgrants.org, you can link, which is our page, you can link over to EPA's SNEP page, and you can read the SNEP strategic plan, which really lays out all of this in quite a bit of detail. It's a really solid, comprehensive plan for ecological improvement and water quality improvement in the Southeast New England region. And the grants program that I manage is aimed at implementing that program, that broader SNEP program, through funding. So you could think of it as the funding component of the broader program that has this vision and these goals. So every grant we award is in support of one or more of these goals. This is the geographic region that both the larger SNEP program and the grants program pertain to. You'll see it covers pretty much all of Rhode Island, but in Massachusetts, it's defined on a watershed basis. So it's really designed to cover all the coastal waters between Chatham on Cape Cod and westerly Rhode Island, including the offshore islands. But it also includes all the watersheds that drain into those coastal waters. And since Narragansett Bay's watershed extends as far north as Worcester and Brockton, Mass., as you can see from this map, those areas, those land areas, are part of our management area and funding region. Similarly, the Buzzards Bay watershed is entirely included within our funding region, and the South Shore of Cape Cod. We recognize that in many cases, if you're doing a, say, for example, a municipal project that may be, let's just say for the sake of example, you're working on a municipal stormwater ordinance. Obviously, you probably can't, if the town happens to lie on the watershed boundary, you may not be able to segment the project into work within and outside of the SNEP region, and we recognize that. But the point is that our grants and all the work of the SNEP program is focused on projects that benefit primarily these watersheds that you see in tan on this map. And again, that includes the land area of all the offshore islands in southeast New England. So that's, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, the Elizabeth Islands, Block Island, and the islands in Narragansett Bay. So Restore America's Estuaries has had this cooperative agreement working in partnership with EPA on this program since 2018. And so we've completed 6 grant rounds so far. The 5 grant rounds so far. This is the 6th. From 2018 to 2022. And during that period, we awarded about 60 grants to many more than 100 grantees, because most of these projects are partnership projects. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And totaling about $12 million in awards. The grants are typically $100,000 to $400,000. We do have provision for smaller grants that I'll talk about in a minute. And we also have a maximum funding level of $500,000, which for projects of exceptional impact and importance will award up to $500,000. Again, if you go to snepgrants.org, you can link to all our prior grants, and that's a really good way to get a feeling for the kind of work we're interested in funding. Having said that, we're always open to new projects that fit within that mandate that I described from the EPA strategic plan. So just because we haven't funded a particular kind of project before doesn't mean we won't fund it in the future, but looking at what we funded is a good way to just get a feel for the program. For 2023, we actually have about $3 million available. And the overarching goal of the grants, as expressed by that strategic plan that I alluded to before, is to restore ecosystems and improve communities. So we're really looking for holistic approaches to solving these problems. And here are really the specific themes that we're interested in this year: restoring small cities and urban environments, defining small city as any city in the SNEP region here, conserving and restoring rural and natural landscapes, both coastal and non-coastal, innovating to improve water quality, promoting environmental justice and equity, addressing environmental change, building and sustaining local and regional partnerships, and fostering regional learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about all these as in this session. These are some of the kinds of projects that we fund. We fund all kinds of estuarine restoration projects, whether those are river restoration, salt marsh restoration, sometimes integrated sort of landscape scale restoration projects that are addressing a number of habitats within a geographic area. We're very interested in funding urban projects of all kinds. Those can be environmental justice projects, green job training related to, for example, sustainable landscaping and stormwater installation. We've funded green streets kind of projects. These are a really good example a lot of times of the kind of holistic approaches I was alluding to a minute ago, where you might have a project that has stormwater elements, but also has trees for dealing with urban heat effects, and might also have bike lanes for dealing with, transportation, alternative transportation modes. So often these projects are multi-benefit type projects. We fund a lot of stormwater work of all different kinds, all different scales too, and coastal resilience projects increasingly. Again, I alluded to innovative technologies like permeable reactive barriers, that sort of thing. We can fund any stage of a restoration project. We can fund plans, we can fund concept plans, we can fund design, engineering designs, we can fund permitting, we can fund construction, we can fund post-construction activities. We may fund in a given grant, we might fund just one of those project segments, or we might fund the whole thing, from start to finish, depending usually on the scale of the project and how involved they are and how long they take. We've funded some marine pollution and solid waste projects. And I alluded before to smaller grants under $100,000. And those will typically be for a category we call peer-to-peer learning. Those can be conferences, technology transfer, sharing practices from either within the region or from beyond the region. It could be technical conferences, could be public conferences, and we really encourage those kinds of proposals, because a big part of what the SNEP program, the larger SNEP program, is all about is not just supporting this kind of work throughout Southeast New England, but facilitating the sharing of information and knowledge and experience and resources throughout the region. So whether you get a grant to do a very site-specific project, let's say install a stormwater best management practice in a particular area, or if it's a conference or a training, we're always looking at how is this project helping to advance the practice of this work throughout the region, not just addressing a problem in one particular area, but hopefully improving the quality and the knowledge of ecological management and knowledge about restoration throughout the Southeast New England region. Here's a list of some of the kinds of organizations we fund, municipalities, state agencies, tribes, nonprofits, academic organizations, regional planning organizations, pretty much any organization except for a federal agency or a private company is eligible for funding as a general kind of rule. And again, almost all the projects that we fund are partnerships, and we really look for partnerships, whether it's establishing a partnership or sustaining a partnership or supporting a partnership, expanding a partnership. We really look for projects that accomplish that in one way or the other. Here's our award calendar for this year. It's pretty similar to prior years. As you know, the request for proposals is open now, and we're accepting applications. This is the second of 2 virtual workshops that we're hosting. Next week, the SNEP Network is hosting a couple of workshops, one online and one in person. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but I think if you just go to their website, I think it's snepnetwork.org. I'll give it to you later. You can find out more about these. And the deadline for submittal of the letter of interest, which is the first step in our application process, is April 7th, I believe. It's kind of hidden on my screen right here. Yep. And so that's the first stage of the application process. It's a very easy application. We're really interested in having this program be as accessible as possible. And if people are not sure whether or not to submit an application, I would say just submit an application, because it'll take you, half an hour, or something like that. And then we'll let you know whether our funding committee, and I'll talk about them in a minute, is interested in considering a full proposal. And if they are, by the end of April, we'll give you an invitation to submit. And we'll look for a full proposal by mid-June. And even the full proposal obviously requires more information than the letter of intent, but even the full proposal is a pretty easy application as these things go, relative to the potential funding available. So again, we try to keep the process as streamlined as we can, recognizing that it is federal funding, so there's a fair amount of regulatory compliance stuff that needs to happen. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then usually, or actually always, we have our awards in place or almost in place by September. And in September or October, we announce the grants. We usually try to do that. Now the pandemic is hopefully over, in person with a meeting, one each in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and bring everybody together, bring together congressional delegations and congressional staff and all the grantees and stakeholders and EPA. And it's usually really fun celebration and a good way to kind of see the work that everybody's doing. So the proposals that rise to the top of all the proposals we see, and first let me say that this program, it's a competitive funding program. It's not as competitive as some, in the sense that, well, to give you an idea, we usually receive about 60 letters of intent every year, something like that, 50 or 60. From those, we might select 20, 25 to request full proposals from. And of those, we'll typically award anywhere from 10 to 15 grants. So it's not like some other programs where, you literally have like a 1 in 100 chance your application will be funded. Having said that, it is a competitive program, and we never have enough money to fund all the projects we'd really like to fund. So, so we have to take a hard look at everything that we receive. And pretty much these are things that we look for. Obviously we look for proposals that support that vision, goals, and priorities that I mentioned before, and that you can find in the SNEP strategic plan. We look for a significant positive impact on ecosystems and communities, by which I mean we're not really interested in funding studies that aren't likely to go anywhere, or that the author of the study does not have a clear idea of how this study might be translated into public policy or ecosystem management or ecological restoration, or something that actually makes a difference in the real world. Nearly all the projects we fund have a connection to water quality and the Clean Water Act, but it's not necessarily a super direct connection. It may be, for example, we funded an oyster restoration plan in Narragansett Bay. It certainly has an impact on water quality, but it's not what you would call a water quality project per se. Similarly, a lot of the habitat restoration, salt marsh restoration, dam removal that we fund has benefits to water quality, but it's about a lot more than that. I've already mentioned we're really always looking to support partnerships. Those can be on any scale. It could be a neighborhood scale all the way up to the entire SNEP region. And similarly, we look toward projects that build local and regional capacity, and that can happen in any number of ways. It may be through the sort of knowledge transfer that I alluded to before. It might be because you're installing a new practice that hasn't been used in the region before, and as a result of that project, managers will have a better idea of whether this particular technology or practice is effective in the region. Similarly, regional learning and expertise can take a lot of different forms. That may be among practitioners, it may be among technical people generally, it may be among the general public, it may be among municipal employees who are learning how to do maintenance on stormwater, BMPs, there's a lot of different levels that can happen on. And related to that, we really like almost every project we fund to have a strong outreach component, whether that's to the general public, to stakeholders, to a technical audience. It really depends on the nature of the project, who that audience might be. These last two bullets are really kind of the same thing, and they relate to what I said before about a significant positive impact. You really should understand the community that you're working in, and you should understand how the project that you're proposing is going to translate into positive change in the real world. And that can be social, that can be environmental, that can be water quality, that can be habitat, it can be a lot of different things. It may not happen during the period of the grant. Maybe you're doing a restoration plan that will be picked up by, that will be used by a municipality to actually install stormwater practices. That's okay. It can happen. It can happen at kind of, we can fund any stage of that process, but that process should include implementation at some point. And if, I get a lot of questions from people about projects they'd like to do where they really haven't thought about who are the stakeholders, who's the community that's going to benefit from this? Does the community, have a need for this? Have they expressed a need for this? Are they going to do anything with it when, maybe it's a watershed plan, for example, or a study. So understand your community, understand your stakeholders when you develop one of these proposals. And these are, kind of following on the last slide, these are what I see as kind of the foundations for successful, not just successful proposals, but successful projects. And again, it's back to identifying the needs of the community or the ecosystem. Good projects are usually built on a planning foundation. Having said that, we recognize that not every part of the SNEP region has plans in place for every practice that we're interested in supporting here. So, you may be doing a project that is not covered in an existing plan, and that's okay as long as you recognize that. For example, a lot of watershed plans are kind of outdated at this point, and you may be doing work that was not identified at the time a plan was developed. You may be updating a plan. You may be developing a plan from scratch at times, or you may be doing a project in an area that where planning just hasn't been done at all. For example, a lot of the rivers in a lot of smaller river systems in the region don't really have much in the way of restoration planning on them. Coastal areas as well, for that matter. Similarly, the municipal vulnerability plans and coastal resilience plans that are now funded in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts are often meshed with our projects. I already alluded to new or existing partnerships. And I think the third to last, second to last bullet, I think I've covered already in terms of engagement of community and stakeholders. But we do require non-federal match in 33% of the award. So if you're requesting $100,000, we're looking for $33,000 committed in non-federal match. That may be cash or it may be in kind. So that can include staff time, it can include volunteer time, and all of that is spelled out in the RFP and on our website. The flip side of my last couple of slides are the things that you really should avoid if you'd like to have a competitive proposal. And I've talked about projects that are not well connected to potential implementation, or those that are not clear in what they're trying to accomplish in terms of benefits for the region. As I said before, you don't necessarily need to be, to have a planning framework that your project is building on. But if there's a plan in place that does cover the activity you're working on, you should know about it. And when people come to us with proposals that just completely ignore existing plans that may cover similar work, it raises eyebrows. We wonder why this project is disconnected from a plan that may cover that activity. Similarly, if there's somebody else doing similar work in the area, you should probably know about that, and maybe partner with them. And also, if we're aware of that, we might let you know about that too. So on more than one occasion, we've received a pre-proposal, a letter of intent, and suggested to the applicant that they reach out to another organization that may be doing similar work. And in some cases, they partner up and come back to us with a full proposal that they're both on board with. Or in some cases, they may submit individual proposals, and then without knowing that the other's submitting a proposal, we let them know, and they may partner up and come back to us with a combined proposal. And, if they're, related to that, if there are two organizations proposing the same, or I should say similar work in the same geographic area, and they're unwilling to partner, then, it kind of raises questions. And, it's very unlikely we would fund both of those projects under those circumstances. The RFP is online, and it's longer than I wish it were, but again, we have federal requirements we have to deal with. But it pretty much should cover all the questions that you might have related to this program. The grants are reimbursable. You incur the expenses, we reimburse you for those costs. I've already mentioned that 33% match, non-federal match is required. The grants will be awarded with a 2-year performance period, and they'll be awarded around the end of this year. So we'll ask you to complete your work by the end of 2025. Semi-annual reports are required. Because this is EPA funding, there's a requirement called quality assurance performance plans. Those are required for any project that either is acquiring or utilizing environmental data. And the purpose is so that those data are transferable and usable by other projects and programs. Not all of our grants require QAPs, but most of them do. The ones that don't are typically like the conferences and informational or purely planning projects. And even some of those may require QAPs. So if you're not sure if a QAP is going to be required for your project, you can contact us and we'll help you figure it out. The QAP can be prepared either by the applicant organization, or you can hire somebody to prepare it for you. Any good engineering firm, environmental engineering firm, can typically do these things. And I guess that's all I'll say about that for the moment. There's more guidance on our website about that you can link to. As I mentioned, federal funding requirements apply. These are things like open bidding requirements for subcontracts over a certain dollar amount. Thankfully, the small purchasing thresholds under EPA requirements are fairly high. So for smaller contracts, the requirements are very easy to comply with. But once you get into really big construction projects over $250,000, then we look for open competition. And applications can be developed over several grant cycles. What I mean by that is, if you apply for a grant and you don't get an award, I hope you won't give up on us. And if you don't find funding for that project elsewhere, come back to us next year. We've often funded projects that came back a second time for funding. And we can provide assistance with developing applications. Similarly, we have a consultant who can help, or who does help our grantees in developing the QAPs. They won't write the QAP for you. I won't write a grant application for you, but if you have questions or need some guidance on either one of those, we can help with those. I mentioned before the SNEP network. It's at snepnetwork.org. So if you think of SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants, our program, as kind of the funding component that is working to implement that broader vision and goals that I mentioned of the SNEP program, then the SNEP network is kind of the technical assistance component. And it's kind of our sister program where we try to work together as closely as we can. They provide technical assistance, we provide funding. Sometimes they provide technical assistance prior to an applicant applying for grant funding, and the applicant then gets grant funding as a result of the technical assistance that the network provided. Sometimes we fund a project and then they go and work with the SNEP network to implement it. Sometimes they work with the SNEP network before and after funding with watershed implementation grants. So it can really happen in any number of ways. I would just encourage you to reach out to the SNEP network, talk with them if you think they may be able to provide assistance on your project. And they also have a new toolkit. So if you see our RFP or just jump on their website, you can access toolkit for green infrastructure and related stuff. And we encourage you to take advantage of that in developing your proposals and in carrying out your projects under SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants. So that's it for my little presentation. Here's my email. Feel free to contact me. Here's our website, snepgrants.org, where again you can find hopefully everything you need. And if not, just reach out to me. And we have quite a lot of people on the call now. That's great. So I think at this point, I'm going to go to the chat and check out your questions. And you could also raise your hand if you prefer. And we'll begin kind of the discussion part of this little workshop. Let me unshare my screen here. I can figure out how to do that. There we go. Okay, and on to the chat. Daniel Goulart asks, can SWIG funding be overlaid on an existing SNEP PWI project if additional funding for design or implementation is needed? What does PWI stand for?
That's the Pilot Watershed Initiative.
Oh yeah, the Pilot Watershed Initiatives. Yeah, sure. For those who aren't aware, the Pilot Watershed Initiatives are several projects that EPA funded with other SNEP dollars other than our grant program to support kind of holistic work in specific watersheds in New Bedford and Charleston, Rhode Island, a couple other places. So yeah, we're always interested in using our funding and seeing our funding meshed or combined with other SNEP or non-SNEP grant funds. Brooke Moyers has the question, is there a limit to the number of proposals an institution or individual can be involved with? Glad you asked. No, there's not. And sometimes we'll get one proposal from an organization that is the primary applicant on an application, and they may be partnering on another application with another primary applicant, or they may be submitting two different project ideas as the primary applicant, and in which case we'll take a look at both of them. That raises another point I should mention, which is that we allow for fiscal sponsors or fiscal agents on projects. So if a small, for example, watershed organization that doesn't have the capacity to manage a grant of this size, the fiscal capacity, on their own, they might partner with a community foundation or a bigger nonprofit or somebody else, and that other organization can serve as a fiscal sponsor for the organization that's actually managing the project. And then Sydney Elder asks or says, oh, wait, I gotta back up here.
Well, Tom, let's Kevin Galligan had his hand raised if you want to go ahead
okay.
first.
Okay, we'll go to Kevin then. Sorry about that.
Thanks,
Kevin,
Tom.
jump on the call and give us your question.
Great. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Just so you know, I chair our wastewater management committee here in Orleans. I also serve as a select board member. And first of all, thank you. And for any folks interested in applying who may not, it is a great process. We've received multiple SNEP awards for our Pleasant Bay watershed project that is just fabulous. All 4 towns working together. So here's my question for you, or you may need to refer it. And if Mass DEP has already reached out to you, you can tell me to go away. But so here we are working on implementation of the next phase of our approved comprehensive wastewater management plan. We're working on phase 3, and a little bit of it is kind of crossing other phases as we look to our Nauset Harbor estuary. I think, as you know, the Nauset Harbor system is one of the largest embayments on Cape Cod. Nauset Beach, the barrier system goes into the Pleasant Bay ACEC. So here's my conundrum, Tom. We would like to apply to be considered for a SNEP award for the work we need to do to get implementation underway for a shared watershed permit with Mass DEP coming out with their new regs. We think we can model the Pleasant Bay experience in the Nauset Harbor estuary between both Eastham and Orleans. However, you go to your little boundary map and it cuts us off. And it really is the quandary, because when you look at Orleans and the connection to the Pleasant Bay system, I would advocate and would love to know how I can further advocate to move that boundary line just a little bit up to encompass all of the Nauset estuary. It really is integral to the entire system, and I don't know why we can't be considered. So what do I need to do?
Okay, so and forgive me because I'm not very familiar with the Nauset estuary, but is it primarily in the SNEP region?
It appears from your boundary map that is completely out, except that the Nauset Beach system that goes into Chatham is. And when we look at Nauset Beach, it truly is a dynamic system that goes all the way up to Eastham. And frankly, to me, it should be included.
Okay. I'm happy to take a look at that, but I think that's a little bit outside of the scope of this call. So shoot me an email. We'll take a better look. There's actually an interactive map that EPA has that you can link to from our website and see that boundary a lot more precisely than the slide that I just put up. And so shoot me an email. We'll take a look at that together and we'll see whether we can make this work.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Tom, let's go to Cindy's question next. Cindy's asking, is it okay to outsource project management, in her case, for an organization that doesn't have full-time staff or capacity?
Yes, we've successfully done that with a number of projects on the Cape in particular, so not a problem.
Great. And Emily, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question too.
Great, thank you. So my question is, partnerships are great at strengthening communities and building capacity. Is there such a thing as too many partners?
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Tom.
No, there's no such thing. The one thing I would say is that our program, unlike some others, defines partners in a pretty specific way, which is which is organizations that are materially contributing to the project, so that they may be providing funding, they may be receiving funding, they might be providing match. But what we specifically ask folks not to do with our applications is to send us like 100 letters from elected officials supporting the project. You know, so if they're genuine partners, that maybe they usually a partner is on the budget. There are cases where a partner is not. It might be, for example, maybe a federal agency is contributing to the work of the project. They would be off budget, but they could still be a partner. Or maybe a municipality is going to be implementing the work that you're doing. For example, maybe you're doing a plan that the municipality is committed to implementing, and they might not be on the budget, but still they'd be a partner in that instance. But again, you can see how it's a material contribution, not just yes, we support this work kind of thing. So
Thank you.
Great. And Donovan, if you want to unmute and ask your question too.
Yes, hello. My question is, and I do have a specific project in mind here, is we have a large coastal resiliency project that we're trying to kind of cobble the funding together with several different groups. It directly impacts several hundred acres of saltwater marsh and shellfish stocks and things along those lines. But as we've gone down this process, we've kind of become partnered with Mass DOT because it looks like with the coastal resiliency, a whole road is going to have to be raised in a certain area that we are. And so I know a lot of their funding is coming from the Biden infrastructure bill. And so my question is if we did have these SNEP funds along with municipal funds and the Mass DOT, but their funding is coming from a federal entity, does that not allow these funds to work together? Do they have to be federally exclusive? Or is it just the federal funds cannot be used for a match?
right, so the 33% has to be non-federal.
Okay.
And I'm not sure we've ever had Mass DOT as a partner on one of our projects. We've certainly had Rhode Island DOT as a partner on projects, and they're able to kind of parse the federal from the state component of their funding. So I would talk with Mass DOT and see if they can do the same thing. I suspect they probably can.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's all we've got in the chat right now. If anybody else has a
Okay.
question, go ahead and hop on or type it in or raise your hand and we'll get to it. Looks like I don't want to mispronounce this. Reza?
Yes, Reza.
Hey, Reza.
Thanks. How are you, Tom?
Good.
Thank you very much for this workshop. It's very informative. I have a question about coastal resilience projects. I mean, particularly projects that they target reduction of the flood risk or erosion risk for communities. Is it something that like generally is within the scope of a SNEP, or it should have like other components of like along with that aspect? I mean, if you have a project which just focuses on reduction of the flood risk for a community, would that be inside the scope of a SNEP?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing I would say is and this is not always easy, but we tend to fund sort of on the green infrastructure side of things and the planning side of things, as opposed to the hard infrastructure side of things. That's not to say we would never fund a project that has hard infrastructure elements to it. But for example, if if there's a coastal road with a seawall along the shore, and a municipality, wants to just raise the road and elevate the seawall, that's probably not the kind of project we would fund. On the other hand, if they were reinforcing the road and then adding living shoreline elements to that
Yeah,
to that
okay.
coastal road, that's the sort of thing we would look at. So,
Yeah,
and
like
this-
nature friendly kind of
Right,
or green.
right, and the same,
And
the same
maybe
goes-
innovative. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
right, and the same goes for water infrastructure too. The kind of projects that we fund. Not that they can't have any hard elements to them, or, but they're primarily nature-based solutions.
Mhm. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Looks
Uh,
like we got them all.
Okay, I'll give everybody one more minute to either put something in the chat or raise your hand. But it looks like we did get all questions. And you know, my email, I provided my email before. It's in the RFP. If something comes to mind that we didn't cover here, by all means, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll do my best to answer your question. And again, most of the questions should be answered in the RFP. Just gonna check my messages again. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. And we're signing off now. And thanks, Rob, for facilitating. You do a better job than I do, facilitating the questions. And have a great day.